One thing that absolutely terrifies me is when somebody who doesn't know much about networking goes out to the store and they buy one of these little home router systems, they plug it in, and all of a sudden it just works, and we're all on Google and everything's great. Well, I've got plenty of episodes that talk about proper configuration of these things, but part of the reason this works is because of something called dynamic IP addressing. On most systems today, you don't actually type in the IP address or the subnet mask or the default gateway. It just magically appears through something called Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, or DHCP. Now, if you take a look at my system right here, you'll see that I have an IP address, I have a subnet mask, and I have a default gateway. What I'm going to tell you right now is I did not enter this. I'll prove it to you. So let me go into Control Panel. So here I am right on Internet Protocol version 4. Let me look at the properties here, and look what it says. Obtain an IP address automatically. And there's also this other one, obtain DNS server address automatically. That does happen at this process, but we talk about DNS in other episodes. So what's happening right here? Well, what's happening is somewhere on your network, you have something called a DHCP server. Now, a DHCP server has to be configured. It does not configure itself automatically. And you set it up to say, look, I'm going to give out from, in my particular example, from 192.168.4.50 to 192.168.4.100, I'm going to pass out these addresses. So as individual computers boot up, they start to broadcast out. They go, I need an IP address. And then the DHCP server will respond and give them, well, not just the IP address, but the subnet mask, the default gateway, and a lot of other information as well. So DHCP is a very, very important thing. It's extremely common. Now for the A+, the thing we have to concern ourselves is how do we set our systems up for DHCP? And luckily for us, pretty much every version of Windows since, well, a long time ago is pre-configured for DHCP. If you go into these Internet Protocol version 4 properties, by default, Windows shows these as obtain an IP address automatically, which is simply saying use DHCP. So DHCP works really, really well unless it doesn't. Let me show you what happens when DHCP fails. Imagine a scenario where suddenly everybody in your network suddenly calls you and says, the internet's down. I always love that term because the internet's never down. It's your connection to the internet that's down. Now, one of the reasons this might happen is because of dynamic IP addressing. If your DHCP server goes down for one reason or another, you may lose your IP address. So let me show you what I mean. Now, I have intentionally turned off my DHCP server just to show you this. So I'm going to type ipconfig. And I want you to see this address right here. Do you see that? That is 169.254 and then 2 random values. That is what we call an APIPA address, automatic private IP addressing. What's happening here is that if your DHCP server goes down, you don't automatically lose your IP address. But if you restart the system, if you shut it down and start it back up again, if you unplug the network cable, there'll be a lot of things where your computer will go back to the DHCP server to re-get its IP address. If it can't get to the DHCP server, Windows is designed to go to these APIPA addresses. I promise you, you'll see this on the A+. If you see a 169.254 and the last 2 numbers don't count, that means that you are on a DHCP client and somehow you are not connected to the DHCP server or the DHCP server is down. So if you see a situation like this, the first thing you're going to have to try is to reestablish that connection. So let's go ahead and try to reestablish that connection right now. So I've gone ahead and got my system properly connected back. So what I want to do here is I'm going to type ipconfig/renew. So when I do this, if I am properly connected, it's going to go back out to the DHCP server and say, can I have an IP address, please? And take a look what just happened here. We can see that we're successful. I've got an IP address back, so life is good. I've done a good job. I am happy. Now, if for any reason you wanted to disconnect, you can type ipconfig/release. And that will go ahead and disconnect you again. Not a whole lot of critical reasons to type ipconfig release, but a lot of times when you're trying to get reestablished to a DHCP server, typing ipconfig renew can be extremely handy. A lot of technicians will just go into the back, unplug their computer and plug it back in, because that forces your computer to do another renew. So there's a lot of ways to get around it, but make sure you know for the A+ how to type ipconfig/renew. Okay. Now a couple other little details to make sure you're aware of. First of all, a PIPA addressing can be weird. For example, if the DHCP server goes down, everybody else is still connected. They all start losing their IP addresses, but they all get 169.254, and those last two digits are randomly generated. So you'll get these weird scenarios where nobody can get on the internet, but we can still share folders and files, and we can print to the printer and stuff like that, where all the local stuff's still working, but you can't get to the internet. That is a big clue that you have a problem with your DHCP server. The other one that's important, and this is why people should always know their network ID. I know my network ID on my network is 192.168.4. something. So what would happen if one day I couldn't get on the network and I typed ipconfig and all of a sudden I get 192.168.1. something? That's not my network ID. This is what we call a rogue DHCP server. It's so easy for somebody to walk into an office, grab some little home router and plug it into one of the Ethernet connections and mess your network up. So know your network ID, and if you see in a PIPA address 169.254, you know you're not connected to your DHCP server. But if you see a network ID that's not a PIPA, but it's not your network ID, that is rogue DHCP server, and that is a big problem in today's networks. Okay, so a couple other little details. Number one, you've got to be plugged in for a PIPA to work. If you physically unplug your network from the back of your system, a PIPA says, oh, I'm just disconnected right now, so I don't have an IP address. So don't let that one trip you up. Okay, you can have a lot of fun with a PIPA. So what I want to do now is show you where a PIPA really comes from in Windows. So I'm going to head over to Control Panel. And again, even though I'm doing this in Windows 10, it works exactly the same way in Vista 7, 8, 8.1. And I'm going to go to Change Adapter Settings. Now, you'll see it says obtain an IP address automatically. That's right, but look at this other tab over here. Do you see this? Alternate configuration. So, alternate configuration is a way for you to go, look, if I'm not dynamic, I want you to do this instead. Now, by default, it says automatic private IP address, a PIPA by default, but you can change this. Let me show you a cute little trick. Like, for example, at my house, I don't use DHCP for security reasons, and every computer in my house, well, at least all the wired computers, have a statically assigned address. So I can go in and, let me just go ahead and set this up. And the reason I know all these numbers, folks, is because it's my network at home, and this is how I set it up. If there's any values I'm typing in here you're not aware of, you will eventually get to the episode that covers it. So take a look what I've done here. What I've done is I've statically configured this as 10.11.12.101 with the default gateway of 10.11.12.1.255.255.255.0. What I've done here is that if this computer, you see this on laptops a lot, on this computer right here, if I'm in a network that has DHCP, well, then it'll get a DHCP address from whatever network I'm in. But when I'm at home, there is no DHCP server. So my computer will not fall back to a PIPA automatically. It will fall back to that address instead. It's a pretty cool feature of Windows, and one you should play with a little bit. It's kind of fun.